I remember, a lot of people online were pretty mad when they found out Total Drama Revenge of the Island would be an all-new cast. Lots of people were expecting reused character traits and rehashed story beats, but Total Drama did well for itself in providing us with 13 new faces. In fact, I'd venture to say that it was this cast which really drove home how good Total Drama was at characterization. While yeah, every teen on the screen has sold their soul for a slim chance at fame, and we're expected to laugh at their misfortunes because of that, the show knew it needn't always be irreverent. With this cast, they were really able to flex on how good they were at squeezing genuine emotion out of a cast of caricatures. I'm Brad with Wicked Binge, here to count down the whole gamut. This is Total Drama Island second generation cast, good to evil. Let's get started.
Hey, it's my show. I can do what I want.
As always, we'll start with the most noble character and work our way down. These characters are the good. In first place, with the gold medal of good, we proudly present Dawn. To be as otherworldly and ethereal as she is, Dawn comes across on the right side of creepy.
Your soul reads like an open book.
She automatically gets points for filling the friend to all the woodland creatures role that DJ vacated. But Dawn demonstrates the ability to empathize with savage mutated fauna as well. Even more remarkable, she shows a goodwill to all her competitors, which, while perturbing in some cases, was wholly genuine. Her apparent ability to read the auras people radiated helped her stay out of situations where her powers could be used for evil, intentionally or otherwise.
A great darkness is surrounding Dakota.
Izzy's popularity in the original series proved everyone loves a wild card, but Dawn's eccentricities are never played as crazy and earnest. She's different, but she's comfortable in her version of normal. And that's a theme that comes up a lot with this cast, so it really drives home the point that, among them, Dawn is our gold standard good. Brick, the cadet, is our silver standard. Remarkably, Brick is perhaps the only nuanced portrayal of what military training does to someone's psyche. That checks out, I guess, because Americans didn't write him. While yes, he's disciplined, commanding, and competitive, he also has a hard time when there's no one telling him what to do. It's also implied that his chilled exterior is an evolved defense to protect an insecure and sensitive center. But it says a lot about Brick that, despite his training and his insecurities, he's no robot. In fact, he can be counted on to never leave one of his comrades behind, to respect the strength of his competition, and even to courageously open himself up to new experiences.
Hang on, men. I'm coming to get you.
His decision to attend fashion school after the fashion challenge, for example, felt like a little arc all his own. Brick is a sweet guy. His main role is to be Total Drama's resident pain magnet. Regardless, he's helpful, courteous, and genuine during his brief and occasionally painful time on the island. So he places here. At ease, soldier. Our bronze medal of good goes to Cameron, the bubble boy. Having been condemned to life in a bubble as a child, Cameron's lack of physical strength and social skills necessitated an incredibly high intellect to counter them, a challenge he apparently rose to meet with gusto. Indeed, Cameron is among Total Drama's brainiest competitors, and certainly the most sympathetic. A good example of this is his gradual friendship with the caustic Anne Maria, and another is in his ending, winning the grand prize at the end of the season, where Cameron actually splits the prize 13 ways. Contrasted with Zoe, who had been driven to hostility by Scott, and Lightning, who was just hostile, Cameron was perhaps the most inoffensive finalist Total Drama ever featured. He only ever used his intellect as a means of aiding others or in self-defense. However, his friendship with Mike keeps him from a higher tier because it allows him to be manipulated by Mal later on. In fact, he actually becomes a pivotal plot in Mal's grand designs. Regardless, Cameron deserves his high placement for his many merits. We defy anyone to say otherwise. Next is Sam. At first, he doesn't seem like much. His lack of physical strength and consistent misfortune left you thinking he would get the boot early on. But Sam eventually reveals himself far more than a punching bag, being one of the kindest competitors on the island. As we've mentioned, his biggest accomplishment to date is finding the soul in Dakota underneath all the lip gloss.
You can do it, Sam!
But Sam did plenty on his own as well. Most notably, he kicks his addiction to video games. Well, not addiction, so much as dependence. We see, when he's in the spotlight, Sam is held back by his awkwardness. This is something he becomes better at handling as he persists in the game. He also returns with the sole intent to be mutated, just so he can relate to his girlfriend better. All these things help him land on his feet very comfortably. Among our good guys. Next is Mike. To be real, Mike probably wouldn't fly today as a concept because the show gets so much wrong about did. Still, we can judge him based on his actions rather than his writing, because even without his many personas, Mike is a good dude. He's at least sympathetic in how he tries to hide his disorder to avoid ridicule, and while it is treated comically, they at least try to not make him the butt of many mean-spirited jokes.
Rehearse a lot in front of my mirror. Duh!
Mike is dignified and well-meaning. He's kind, upbeat, and somewhat meek. Great fodder for a budding romance with Zoe and a troublesome love triangle with Anne Maria. To avoid going into Mike's many alters as their own characters, with one exception who you'll meet later, we can also say that Mike cares deeply for his other personas as well as the other competitors, something that ultimately plays into the crooked hands of another. But for the most part, Mike and all his personas appear to be good people. It should be noted though that his personalities deserved better than what they got. You know they did. Then there's Zoe, our indie chick. Going by visual development for the season, it appears that Zoe was added pretty late in the game. Regardless, she made an impact for her formidable but also vulnerable characterization. Originally insecure, Zoe came across as overeager to make friends, and this sometimes played into evil hands. She also gave off that not like other girls vibe that usually heralds pretension. However, this isn't to say that her views or her insecurities make her elitist. Actually, she's nice and friendly, tolerant of differences, and protective of those she cares about. She even has her own alter ego, in a sense, in the form of Commando Zoe, which only comes out when she needs to uphold her own honor. Zoe's not dominated by her relationship with Mike. That is, she has plenty of characterizing moments which constitute her as a good person outside of it. But she really does shine when her relationship with Mike is at the forefront, most notably in her ongoing fight with Mal, who keeps her from him. Zoe's a great character, guys. We should all be so lucky to have someone like her in our corner. Moving on, here we find Dakota. For all the absurd stuff that came out of this era in total drama history, Dakota helped keep us grounded in it, ultimately being a reality show. Because her father was already rich and she had no need for the prize money, Dakota entered the competition with the pronounced intention to win herself a spinoff. This backfires predictably. In her vein to someday be the biggest thing ever, she quickly gets eliminated and refuses to leave, prompting Chris to demoralize her as one of his interns. This riches to rags tale softens her and further drives her into the arms of Sam, who assists in smoothing down her rougher edges. Dakota also undergoes a monstrous transformation as a result of Chris's carelessness regarding the radiation he exposes her to. In this form, she really comes through as a good friend to Sam and really cementing her transition to becoming a better person, standing up to a mutant for Sam and even abandoning her pursuit of a spinoff in order to start a relationship with him. Dakota's a good lesson for all of us that we shouldn't write people off. She enters the series with a shallow dream but good intentions, and those good intentions are ultimately what wins out with her. On a literally corrosive island, that's a good thing to see. Moving on, let's take a look at our neutrals. Guys who don't mean any harm but fall short in word or deed of the good spots on our list. This is the gray area. Our first few are largely inoffensive and only stumble at the finish line for their lack of characterization. For example, let's take a look at Silent B Beverly, otherwise known as B. B is the least vocal of any total drama contestant, not for any particular reason other than a presumed comfortability with silence. B is a smart guy, at least inventive, but his total lack of dialogue makes him difficult to rank, possibly unrankable by our traditional methods. We can say that B means no harm. He's enough of a team player to utilize his creativity for his partners. Despite his silence, he wins the favor of his teammates and the enmity of a villain. This indicates he does care about the people around him. But B gets no character arc, due in part to his brief time on the show. We can't say a thing against him, but that's about all you can say for him, too. But this isn't true for Stacy, the compulsive liar. To be fair, we never actually learn if Stacy is lying, but it's heavily implied that the many tales she tells about her gilded ancestry are complete bull.
And my Great.
Yeah, that's great.
And unfortunately, that's all Stacy seemed to be able to talk about, which quickly estranged her from her teammates. At the first elimination ceremony of the 4th season, she loses her claim to the prize, and all her hair for this reason. In retrospect, Stacy's probably the tamest way Total Drama could have portrayed a compulsive liar. Stacy isn't a threat, she doesn't lie about other people, for example, but she's also pathetically insecure and inauthentic. You could argue that she has no ill will to bear, but she doesn't last long enough for us to definitely see if that's true, so we'll have to leave her here, just south of neutral. Here is also where we find Anne Maria, a Snooki-esque Brooklynite with the hairspray to prove it. Anne Maria was clearly meant as a parody of materialistic and shallow reality stars, similar to Dakota. However, she's another case that proves vapid doesn't mean incompetent. In fact, Anne Maria is one of our most active competitors, if somewhat unintentionally. However, this ambition doesn't translate well in the goodness department, which places her fairly low on our list at the bottom of our gray pile. Anne Maria is unfortunately very hostile to her peers, as well as very selfish.
No touching the hair, Fluorite.
While certainly not as openly aggressive as others, she will defend herself readily, particularly her hair, without much provocation. She's also remembered for being a wrench thrown in Zoe and Mike's relationship when she falls for his personality, Vino. But we can at least say for Anne Maria that her ambitions never lead her down a dark path. Lacking, though, her principles might be, she does have them. Her endgame, though, really seals her as a not that nice person. She's willing to succumb to Zeke's advances for the diamond he offers her, and quits the competition in an attempt to pawn it off, demonstrating that, at the end of the day, all she really cares about is money and herself. But selfishness alone doesn't make someone a villain, especially not on an island literally brimming with toxicity. So what makes a villain in such a wasteland? Let's take a look. These characters are the bad and the evil. Then there's Jo, the Jockette. Jo was probably the closest we came to rehashing an old contestant. I honestly would call her a continuation of Eva's early character, before she went crackers, that is. Like Eva, Jo is hyper-competitive and adamant about being the best.
2 words. Dead weight.
She feels due a level of respect, something that comes out in her interactions with others. Further, her short temper leaves her difficult to work with.
Called a winning attitude.
Indeed, she only forms alliances with the intent to use or even betray her comrades, and has no qualms being underhanded in how she uses her amazing strength. Jo is definitely a loner. Though she appears to genuinely want to be loved and accepted deep down, she visibly lacks the tools to get there. When in others' company, she's territorial, and thus isolating, and this cost her the game in the 4th season. It also does her no favors in the 5th, where she gets ousted early for her uncooperativeness. It might be said of her, though, that Jo is a pretty good person to have as a rival. In this role, she's likely the best friend that her adversary Lightning was able to make. Speaking of Rudolph Lightning Jackson, we have a bronze medal of evil with his name on it. He's probably bummed to receive bronze too, because Lightning is characterized by his egotism and unsportsmanlike arrogance. An athlete sorely lacking in the thought department, Lightning had none of Tyler's loyalty or Sky's good humor. Actually, he was one of those unfortunate instances where brawn is synonymous with bully. In fact, Lightning's general douchebaggery operates under almost no provocation. Good examples of this can be found throughout his relationship with his competitors, perhaps none so much as Cameron, with whom he shares a very 80s teen movie-esque rivalry. Perhaps the most damning evidence we have that Lightning is just a bad dude in general is how bleak the ending is if he wins, compared to Cameron's. You can just tell, no one likes the guy, but to Lightning's credit, it shouldn't be said that he hasn't earned his arrogance for his athletic prowess and tenable determination. Is he a good guy? No, but he's good at what he does, and we'll say that for him. Finally, our heart of down-home darkness, Scott, takes silver. Scott might actually be Total Drama's cleverest villain, both in terms of writing and in his character. Unlike our last few antagonists, Scott isn't terribly charismatic, nor is he trying to be. He doesn't care about manipulating people or using them to get ahead. He schemes simply because he enjoys it, and that's pretty brilliant. At the expense of any particular emotional arc, Scott sort of gets to be a force of general chaos, a trait we see again in Mal. He causes trouble because he thinks it's funny. Him not necessarily caring about his team lets him be an antagonist in different ways. namely acting as a saboteur against his own team. His most villainous deed is the wrench he throws in the budding romantic relationship between Mike and Zoe, even blackmailing Mike off the island. Scott is one of several contestants to return, and his tendencies are curtailed significantly. He even finds himself outdone and terrified by Mal. To be as odious as Scott is, he's equally irreverent. He doesn't have some larger motive to accomplish. He isn't trying to prove his worth or some cliche. He just enjoys being devious. His return largely establishes this as a facet of his personality. Truthfully, that's pretty good writing. Sometimes it's nice to have a villain who's evil because they want to be. It certainly makes it more entertaining when they finally get theirs. So Scott's our most evil, or he would be if not for one other. Of course, for our gold medal of evil, we present the aptly named malevolent one, known otherwise as Mal. Mal is a really weird case, being a malicious and outright ruthless split personality of the contestant Mike. Unlike the other personalities who tended to fear him, Mal sought to separate himself from Mike and even overthrow him as a dominant persona. To illustrate the battle for Mike's subconscious, Total Drama literally took us into his head to watch the action play out, and that raises more than a few questions considering Total Drama was supposed to be reality television. Like, what if you're watching X Factor and all of a sudden they started broadcasting from inside Simon's brain? Admit it, that's pretty weird. But that plot contrivance aside, Mal was undoubtedly Total Drama's wickedest villain, and for the absurdity of his concept, he was played straight as a violent criminal. Total Drama gave us a psycho killer with a chainsaw and a hook, but his emo-haired beanpole was scarier. Further, Mal only appears in one season, and his single-minded focus on his evil ambitions left him nothing in the way of redeeming qualities. Instead, he filled his airtime with horrors, hijacking machines, traumatizing the competition, and managing the perfect balance of cold composure and chaotic evil. He's so evil, in fact, that Mike has to hit a reset button in his brain, okay? In order to be rid of him for good. The length and breadth of Mal's criminal history is unknown, though it apparently even gave Duncan pause when they were in juvenile hall together. Regardless, we remember him as Total Drama's most vile contestant, but he rests in pieces now, thanks to Mike's bravery. And so let the people say, good riddance. But real quick in the comment section, do you think he's worse than Chris? What do you think? Let us know in the comment section below. Make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell, and binge our Good to Evil playlist, where we break down the morality of the characters in your favorite cartoons, shows, and movies.